Now we'll discuss another important topic from this chapter, which is actually a repeated theme in the UPSC optional paper, that is sociology and common sense. Okay, how is sociology related to common sense, or how common sense knowledge is different from sociology? What makes these two disciplines different? Okay, such types of questions and such type understanding is necessary in your optional paper. Okay, so we'll begin first by discussing about what is common sense knowledge and what are the characteristics of common sense. Okay, that is first thing we will discuss. So how can you define common sense knowledge, or can you identify some of the characteristics associated with common sense knowledge? Okay, in how do we define, or what are the characteristics of common sense? So, what is the peculiarity about common sense knowledge? The major feature is that it is highly localized. Okay, it is highly localized, which means that common sense knowledge, it is particular to a place and to a time period. Okay, we cannot claim a universality or applicability of the knowledge across the place and across time. Okay, for example, let's take the case of a let's take the case of a patriarchal society. In a patriarchal society, the common sense knowledge would be that men are the ideal breadwinner and women is the household manager. Okay, that is a common sense knowledge which would be prevalent in a patriarchal society. Now you take the case of an egalitarian society. The egalitarian society would have a common sense knowledge that both men and women are equal participants. Okay, equal participants in society, in economy, right? So depending upon the society, depending upon the area, the time period, we have certain knowledge that is orally transmitted between and among the people. Such type of knowledge can be called as common sense knowledge. Okay, so common sense knowledge, as I said earlier, how can we define it? It is actually the popular beliefs. Okay, the beliefs and ideology, the people of an area or people of a time period. Okay, those belonging to a certain period. Like for example, in ancient India, there would be some common sense knowledge. For example, in ancient India, practice like sati was there, right? Which was justified in the name that women are obliged to do so. But today we don't have such practices. We now preach equality, right? So with time also there can be differences in the beliefs and ideas we uphold. That is why I said common sense knowledge is highly localized. Okay, okay, it is highly localized. This is not locality, it is highly localized. Okay, localized. Okay. So, how can we define common sense knowledge? Common sense knowledge can be defined as the popular beliefs and ideas. Okay, that is particular to a place and what time period. Okay, I hope the definition and the first characteristic is clear. Now, how can we, what are the other features that we can identify? uh, a common sense knowledge does not have any scientific basis. Okay, common sense knowledge does not have any scientific basis. Okay, you cannot find any empirical reasoning or empirical understanding for that knowledge. Okay, for example, you might have heard that women are emotional, men are aggressive. There is no scientific evidence to prove this, right? But this is something that is generally believed by the people, right? Men are aggressive, men can be angry, can be rude, while women is expected to be calm, women is expected to be emotional. That is why we see in the care economy also we see higher participation of women, right? So these knowledge or these understanding does not have any scientific basis. It is just preached and believed by the people of the society, right? So common sense knowledge has no scientific basis, which means that there is no body of concept, no methodology. There is no particular method to study common sense. No scientific basis means what? There is no body of concept. There is no method to study common sense knowledge, right? When we take sociology, we have different methodologies, which we'll be discussing in our upcoming chapter. To study sociology, to study sociological aspects, there are different methodologies. But for common sense knowledge, since it is no scientific basis, there is no such thing as body of concepts, the methods that we should follow, the ideologies that we should uphold. No, nothing exists in case of common sense knowledge. Okay, so the first characteristic is that common sense knowledge is highly localized. The second characteristic is that common sense knowledge has got no scientific basis. Okay, then what else? Yeah, common sense knowledge is, it does not have, we cannot claim what a uniform. It varies, as I said earlier. It would vary with place as well as it will vary with time. Okay, common sense knowledge is not the same always. Let's take the case of natural science like physics, chemistry. You can find many laws, right? We have law of gravity, we have laws of motion, Newton's law of motion. These laws exist all throughout the time, right? It is independent of the time. These laws have applicability across the universe and across the time period. But common sense knowledge is not like that. Okay, it is time dependent. Okay, as time changes, as the morality and value system of the society changes, we can also see difference in what we can also see difference in the common sense knowledge. Okay, we can see difference in common sense knowledge. What exactly this common sense knowledge reflect? Does that, as I said, it does not have any scientific basis. Then what is common sense knowledge reflecting? Common sense knowledge that says men are the ideal breadwinner reflects the prejudice of a patriarchal society, right? A common sense knowledge that says women's primary role is reproduction reflects the ignorance about the capability of women, reflects the bias of the society, right? So common sense knowledge is nothing but it is the reflection of the prejudice that exists in the society. Okay, it's a reflection of the biased nature of the society. It is a reflection of the ignorance that exists in the society. Okay, I hope all these features are clear to you. So, how do you define common sense knowledge? Common sense knowledge are popular beliefs and ideas that belong to a particular locality in a particular time period. This is how you define. Okay, first point should be popular belief. Second, okay, sorry. Second point should be that it is particular to a place and to a time period. Okay, this is how you should define common sense knowledge. And we discussed the features of common sense knowledge. It is highly localized, it has got no scientific basis, it is time dependent, and it is nothing but the reflection of the prejudice, the ignorance and bias that exist in the society. Okay, now we'll discuss what is common sense knowledge. Okay, we'll discuss what is common sense knowledge. Sorry, we'll discuss what is sociology or how is sociology different from common sense knowledge. Okay, so how is sociology different? Is sociological knowledge localized? We cannot claim a universality for sociology also. Yes, there is no universality. Compared to common sense knowledge, sociology is far more general. Okay, sociological knowledge and sociological perspective, insight, it is far more general. Okay, it's not universal, but still it is far more general. Okay, then what else? Sociology has got scientific basis. That is, there is a definite body of concepts that exist in sociology. There is definite methodology, approaches that exist in sociology, okay, which is used for sociological studies. So there exists a scientific basis. Okay, scientific basis. Then what else? Yes, Sociology is the deeper understanding of society. It is a scientific study of society. Sociology will be backed by empirical evidences. It will be backed by logical reasoning. Okay, so it is not the reflection of prejudice or ignorance, but rather it is a systematic and scientific study of the society, because of which it is verifiable, and it will be substantiated by certain evidences. Okay, certain evidences. Okay, this is what sociology is. So I hope you understand the difference between sociology and common sense. Let's take the example. Okay, I'll write a scenario here. Okay, a scenario, a common scenario, and then we'll understand how common sense and sociology would interpret this scenario. Okay, so the scenario is that an unemployed man uh, facing difficulty in managing or in managing his family affairs. Okay, I hope the scenario is very clear to you. Okay, I hope the scenario is clear to you. Okay, I'll write somewhere here. Okay, what is the scenario? The scenario here is that there is an unemployed man, and that unemployed man is facing difficulty. Okay, there's facing difficulty in, okay, an unemployed man facing difficulty in managing family affairs. This is the scenario. Now, let's look at how common sense knowledge would interpret this and how sociology would be interpreting this. Okay, now the common sense knowledge would say that the man is lazy. That is why he's not going for job. Okay, why he is unemployed? He is unemployed because he is lazy. Very evident reason, right? He is lazy. Then he is unemployed, or he is not having good education because he is not brilliant. Okay, he is not academically brilliant, and that is why he does not have good education, because of which he will not find any good job. Okay, and he is not getting employment because he is lazy, he is not looking for it. Okay, this is how common sense knowledge would interpret this scenario. Okay, now let's look how sociology would interpret the scenario. It's a systematic or scientific study, right? So it will dive deeper. Now, it will look at the structural inequalities that exist in the society, because of which there is restricted opportunity for this man. For example, let's take a society where the caste identity is predominant, and if this man is belonging to a so called lower caste, then his job opportunities will be restricted. Sociology would look into those social reasons. Okay, sociology would look in the structural reasons that prevent the man from accessing the available opportunity, that restrict the choices available to him. Okay, so sociology would be looking at the structural reasons. Okay, that actually results in inequality of opportunity. Okay, so the scenario is same here, and I hope you understand how common sense knowledge and sociology is interpreting this scenario differently. Okay, the scenario is same, but common sense knowledge, it just rely on the peripheral matters, what is very easy to understand. He's not having job because he's lazy. He is not having good education because he is not capable of having good education. But sociology is not like that. It will dive deeper. It will look into those factors that restricted education, access to job. Okay, what are the structural impediments the person is having? That is what sociology would examine. Okay, so this is a general example. I just said this one so that you will understand the concept better. Now, in the example, from the exam point of view, if you want to write an example, the best one would be the study of suicide by Emil Durkheim. Okay, so this is one classic example you should write. Okay, so that your example will have a sociological perspective also. Look at here, what a suicide study reflects. In the suicide study, he concludes that The general perception, the common sense knowledge is that suicide is an individual phenomenon. That is, a person commits suicide because he is having some problems or because he was not capable to handle life. Okay, that is how common sense knowledge would interpret. But sociology says that, or sociological perspective says that suicide is a social phenomenon. Okay, there are social factors or social reasons that lead to what, that lead to suicide, and we have to dive into those social factors. This is what the study of suicide contains. We'll study this in detail when we are dealing with the chapter sociological thinkers, okay, where you have to study all this in detail. But for the time being, here you will be writing, this question will be, how is sociology common sense related, or how sociology common sense is different. So you can write the characteristics of sociology, you can write the common in contrast to that common sense knowledge. Okay, whatever point you write in sociology, try to counter, this is how it is different from common sense knowledge. Okay, and then you can mention this example, and you just don't write your example vaguely. Example, the study of suicide. This is not how you should write an example. How you should write example, study of suicide. Common sense knowledge says it is an individual phenomenon, but the sociological study reflected that it is a social phenomenon. This is how you should write your example. So that you're not just quoting the example, you are putting that in the right place. Okay, you're establishing your points. Okay, you're not just quoting an example, you're establishing whatever content you have already written. Okay, this is how you should write the example. Okay, I hope it is clear. That's all about that topic.